What if I told you that everything you know about becoming a fighter pilot is a lie? That Top Gun, the movie that inspired an entire generation to join the Navy, got almost everything wrong. I'm talking about the brutal reality that Hollywood never showed you, the truth that separates dreamers from the 1% who actually make it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why real Navy fighter pilots laugh when they watch that movie, and why the actual journey is 1,000 times more intense than anything Tom Cruise ever did on screen. Let's start with the biggest lie. In Top Gun, Pete Mitchell, call sign Maverick, is this rebellious hotshot who breaks every rule in the book and somehow still gets to fly the Navy's most expensive aircraft. He buzzes the control tower. He FLIs recklessly. He's constantly challenging authority. And what happens? He becomes the hero. He gets the girl. He saves the day. Hollywood told you that raw talent and attitude are enough, that if you're naturally gifted, the system will bend for you. That's complete fiction. And it's dangerous. Fiction because it's made thousands of young Americans believe they can swagger their way into the cockpit of an F-18. The reality is so far from that movie that it's almost criminal. Here's what actually happens. Before you even think about touching a fighter jet, before you even apply to flight school, you need a 4-year college degree, not a high school diploma, not some weekend courses, a bachelor's degree from an accredited university. And not just any degree where you partied your way through. The Navy looks at your grades, your coursework, your leadership activities. They want to see that you can handle complex academic material while managing your time and maintaining discipline. That's for years of your life invested before you even start the actual training. Maverick never mentioned sitting through calculus classes or writing research papers, did he? But every single Navy pilot has done exactly that. And that's just the first gate. Next comes the physical requirements. And this is where dreams start dying by the thousands. Your vision needs to be perfect or correctable to perfect. We're talking 20/20 vision in both eyes. Your depth perception has to be flawless. Because when you're landing on a carrier deck at night, judging distances in 3 dimensions is literally life or death. Color blindness, disqualifying. Any issue with your eyes, you're done before you start. The Navy isn't being picky for fun. They're being picky because they're about to invest millions of dollars training you to fly aircraft that cost more than most people will earn in their entire lifetime. Your height matters too, and this shocks people. You need to be between 5'2" and 6'5". Too short and you can't reach the controls properly. Too tall and you don't fit in the ejection envelope safely. The cockpit of a fighter jet isn't designed for comfort. It's designed for combat effectiveness. Every inch matters. Your weight needs to be proportional to your height. You need to be in exceptional physical condition. And I don't mean you go to the gym twice a week. I mean, you can run 3 miles in under 18 minutes. You can do dead hand pull-ups. Your cardiovascular endurance is in the top percentile for your age group. This is baseline. This is just to apply. Then comes the testing. And this is where the Navy really starts. Separating people who think they want to fly from people who actually can. The aviation selection test battery isn't like the SAT. It's not something you can study for by memorizing vocabulary words. This test is designed to measure things you either have or don't have. Spatial awareness, the ability to think in 3 dimensions, mechanical comprehension, hand-eye coordination, the capacity to process multiple inputs simultaneously while under time pressure. They're literally testing whether your brain is wired for this kind of work. Most people fail, not because they're stupid, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because their brain doesn't process information the way a fighter pilot's brain needs to. Let's say you've made it through all of that. You've got your degree, your eyes are perfect, your body is in peak condition, you scored high enough on the tests. You're in maybe the top 5% of everyone who started with the same dream. Now you need to become an officer. Because here's something else the movie glossed over. Every Navy pilot is a commissioned officer. You are not just learning to fly, you are learning to lead. You're becoming part of the Naval Officer Corps, and that's its own separate gauntlet. Most people go one of 2 routes. Either you attend the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, or you go through Officer Candidate School. Let's talk about the Naval Academy first, because the numbers alone are terrifying. The acceptance rate is around 8%. You're competing against valedictorians, star athletes, student body presidents, kids who have been preparing for this their entire lives. Getting into the Naval Academy is harder than getting into UCLA, harder than NYU, comparable to Ivy League schools. And if you get in, you're signing up for 4 years of military college where every Single day is regimented. You wake up at dawn. You're in uniform all day. You're taking incredibly challenging courses in engineering, physics, mathematics, navigation, military history, leadership. You're maintaining peak physical fitness because you're tested regularly. You're learning military protocol, naval tradition, how to lead sailors who will one day depend on your decisions. You're doing all of this while knowing that one major screw-up can get you expelled. 4 years of this. 4 years where your friends from high school are having the normal college experience, and you're learning how to plot firing solutions and studying thermodynamics. And at the end of those 4 years, you still haven't flown anything. You've just earned the right to try. Officer candidate school is the other path, and it's not easier. It's condensed brutality. 12 weeks where they take civilians and turn them into naval officers. You're being broken down, psychologically and physically, and then rebuilt according to military standards. You're learning to make decisions under pressure. You're being evaluated constantly on your leadership potential, your ability to handle stress, your physical endurance, your attention to detail. People quit, people fail, and those who graduate are still just at the starting line. So now you're a commissioned officer in the United States Navy. You have your degree. You've proven your physical and mental capabilities. You've made it further than 95% of the people who started with the same dream. Time to fly fighters, right? Not even close. You're going to Pensacola, Florida, for 6 weeks of aviation pre-flight indoctrination. This is ground school on steroids. You're learning the absolute fundamentals of how aircraft work, aerodynamics, how wings generate lift, how engines produce thrust, weather patterns, and how they affect flight, navigation using instruments, radio communication procedures, emergency protocols, everything you need to know before you ever leave the ground. And here's something the movie definitely didn't show you. Water survival training. You're going to be flying over the ocean, and if something goes wrong, you might end up in the water. So they put you in a pool wearing a flight suit and boots. They make you swim laps until you're exhausted. Then they simulate helicopter crashes. They strap you into a mock cockpit, flip it upside down, submerge it in the pool, and you have to escape while disoriented and holding your breath. They do this over and over until you can do it in your sleep, because one day your life might depend on it. This is where people discover they have claustrophobia they never knew about. This is where the reality of what you're signing up for becomes very, very real. Finally, you get to actual flight training. But you're not flying anything that looks like a fighter jet. You're flying the T-6 Texan II, a turboprop trainer. It's a capable aircraft, but it's designed for one thing: finding out if you can actually fly or if the Navy just wasted a year of training on you. You have roughly 6 months and about 80 flight hours to prove yourself. Your instructor sits behind you in the back seat, watching everything you do. Every movement of the stick, every adjustment of the throttle, every radio call, every decision. Nothing escapes evaluation. The flights start simple. Basic handling, takeoffs and landings, learning to feel the aircraft, but they get complex fast. You're doing aerobatics, learning how the aircraft behaves in unusual attitudes. You're flying on instruments, learning to trust your gauges when your body is lying to you about which way is up. You're flying in formation with other aircraft, maintaining precise position while managing everything else. You're flying at night when the horizon disappears and the world becomes a black void with scattered lights. Each flight is graded. Each flight builds on the previous one. Fall behind and you'll never catch up. The pressure is constant and unrelenting. You're studying flight procedures every night. You're chair flying, sitting in a chair with your eyes closed, visualizing the next day's flight from startup to shutdown, rehearsing every action, every communication, every decision. You're doing this because you know that tomorrow you'll be evaluated again. And if you fail too many flights, you're gone. No dramatic speech from a mentor brings you back. No second chances. You're reassigned to a different job in the Navy, and your dream of flying fighters ends permanently. The washout rate in primary flight training historically runs between 20 and 30%. Think about that. These aren't random people of the street. These are people who already beat incredible odds just to get here. People who have college degrees and perfect vision and exceptional fitness and high test scores and who graduated from officer training. And still, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 doesn't make it. They're not bad people. They're not stupid or lazy, but flying a high-performance aircraft while making split-second decisions, while following exact procedures, while communicating clearly, while maintaining situational awareness. It's more than some people can handle. It's more than most people can handle. There's no shame in washing out. because what the Navy is asking is genuinely superhuman. But let's say you're in the 70 to 80% who make it through primary. You've proven you can fly. Now comes the selection that determines your entire future. Based on your class ranking and the Navy's current needs, you'll be assigned to either maritime patrol aircraft, helicopters, or strike fighters. If you want to fly fighters, you need to be at the top of your class, not middle of the pack, not pretty good, the top. The Navy doesn't send average pilots to fly Super Hornets. They send the absolute best, and even then, only if there are open slots. If you're selected for strike, congratulations. You just won a lottery that most people don't even get a ticket for. But you've got another year of training ahead. And this year makes everything before it look easy. You transition to the T-45 Goshawk, a jet trainer that actually feels like the real thing. Faster, more powerful, more complex, more demanding. Now we're learning tactical formation, flying where you're working as part of a team, executing combat procedures. You're practicing air combat maneuvering, learning how to employ your aircraft offensively and defensively against an adversary. You're doing close air support, learning how to deliver weapons accurately on ground targets without hitting friendly forces. And then comes carrier qualification. And this is where people truly understand what they've gotten themselves into. Landing on an aircraft carrier is considered one of the most difficult things any pilot can do in any aircraft. You're approaching a ship that's moving through the ocean. The deck is pitching up and down with the waves. It's rolling side to side. You're coming in at over 130 miles per hour. Your target is a set of arresting wires stretched across the deck. You need to catch one of those wires with your tail hook to stop your aircraft before you run out of deck. The margin for error is 0. If you come into high, you miss all the wires, and you need to immediately go to full power and take off again before you reach the end of the deck and go into the water. If you come into low, you hit the back of the ship. If you come in crooked, you can crash into aircraft parked on the deck. The landing area is tiny. The ship is moving. Everything is happening in seconds. Your heart is pounding. Your hands are sweating. And you're doing this for the first time with your instructor and the entire ship watching. People have died doing this. Many people. In training and in operations. This is not theoretical danger. This is real. You need to do day landings until you're qualified. Then you do night landings, which are exponentially harder. At night, over the ocean, there's no horizon. There's no reference points. It's just black water and the lights of the carrier deck. You're using instruments and the optical landing system to guide you in. But your brain is screaming that something is wrong because you can't see the water rushing up beneath you. This is where spatial disorientation kills pilots who don't trust their instruments. This is where the training separates people who can truly handle the pressure from people who can't. Every carrier landing is graded on a scale from OK to cut, and you need to maintain a certain average to stay qualified. Every landing is recorded and reviewed. Every mistake is identified and corrected. There's no hiding. There's no faking it. Either you can do this or you can't. And if you can't, you don't fly of carriers. It's that simple and that brutal. Now, let's talk about the actual Top Gun, because this is where the movie got really creative with reality. The official name is the Navy Strike Fighter Tactics Instructor Program, and it's nothing like what you saw on screen. First of all, you don't go there straight out of flight school. You need to be an experienced fleet pilot first. You need years of operational flying under your belt. You need to be recommended by your commanding officer as one of the top pilots in your squadron. Then you need to be selected through a competitive process, because only a small number of pilots attend each class. The course lasts 13 weeks, and during that time, you're flying multiple times per day in complex scenarios designed to simulate real combat. But here's the thing that would shock Maverick. You're not there to prove you're the best pilot. You're there to become an instructor. Top Gun's mission is to teach fleet pilots how to survive and win in air combat. And to do that, they need instructors who not only can fly and fight at the highest level, but can also teach others how to do it. You're learning enemy tactics. You're learning friendly tactics. You're learning weapon systems and threat identification and mission planning and debriefing techniques. You're learning how to take a pilot who's good and make them great. And here's something that would have ruined the movie. There's no competitive ranking anymore. Top Gun eliminated that years ago because it wasn't producing better outcomes. Competition sometimes made pilots selfish, made them focused on individual performance instead of team effectiveness. Modern Top Gun emphasizes cooperation, communication, mutual support. There's no trophy for the best pilot. There's no plaque on the wall. There's just the knowledge that you're now qualified to keep other pilots alive when the shooting starts. And that's worth more than any trophy. Let's talk about something the movie showed, but didn't really explain. G-forces. When a fighter jet maneuvers hard, the pilot experiences multiple times the force of gravity pressing down on their body. At 5 gs, which is moderate for a modern fighter, your body suddenly weighs 5 times what it normally does. Your head, which usually weighs about 10 or 11 pounds, now weighs 55 pounds. Your arms feel like they're made of lead. Blood starts draining from your brain down into your lower body because of the acceleration. If you don't actively fight this, you'll experience G-induced loss of consciousness, and you'll pass out at the controls of a $60 million aircraft traveling faster than the speed of sound. To prevent this, pilots use something called the anti-G straining maneuver. You tense every muscle in your lower body and core while taking short, forced breaths. You're essentially fighting your own cardiovascular system. The G-suit helps by inflating bladders in your legs and abdomen to restrict blood flow, but it's not magic. You still need to do the straining maneuver. You still need to grunt and strain and fight to keep blood in your brain. At 9 gs, which modern fighters can pull, you're operating at the absolute limit of human physiology. Your vision tunnels and turns grey. Your blood pressure skyrockets. Every muscle in your core is flexed to maximum. And you're doing this while flying in formation, tracking targets, making tactical decisions, communicating with your wingman. In the movie, you saw Maverick amaze a little during hard turns. In reality, pilots are groaning and straining and fighting their own body's response. After a flight with multiple high-G maneuvers, you're exhausted. Your neck hurts. Your back hurts. Your core is sore like you just did 100 sit-ups. Some pilots develop chronic neck and back problems from years of this abuse. This is part of the job that never makes it into recruiting videos. But it's very, very real. Now, let's talk about the technology. Because this is another area where Hollywood simplified things to the point of fiction. Modern fighter jets aren't just aircraft. They're incredibly complex weapons systems with the pilot as the central processor. The F-A-18 Super Hornet has a heads-up display that projects critical information onto the windscreen in front of the pilot. Airspeed, altitude, heading, weapon status, radar contacts, navigation data, all overlaid on the real world, so you can see it without looking down at your instruments. The helmet-mounted display allows pilots to target weapons just by looking at an enemy aircraft. Where your eyes point, your missiles can guide. The radar isn't just showing you contacts. It's tracking dozens of targets simultaneously, identifying friend from foe using electronic signatures, calculating intercept courses, providing threat warnings, all in real time. The pilot needs to interpret all of this information instantly while maneuvering at 500 knots. You need to know what every symbol means, what every warning indicates, how to prioritize threats, how to employ different weapons against different targets. It's like playing the most complex video game ever created, except everything is happening in 3 dimensions at supersonic speeds. And if you make a mistake, people die. And you're doing all of this while communicating over multiple radio frequencies. You're talking to your wingmen on one frequency. You're talking to the air warfare commander on another. You're talking to tanker aircraft on another. You're following rules of engagement that could fill a small book. You're managing your fuel state because you only have so much and you need enough to get back to the carrier. You're navigating using GPS and inertial systems. You're thinking 3 moves ahead like a chess player, anticipating what the enemy might do and positioning yourself accordingly. The mental workload is absolutely staggering. And this is why the selection process is so unforgiving. They're not looking for people who can fly. They're looking for people who can fly while doing 50 other things perfectly under life-threatening pressure. Here's something else the movie got completely wrong. The culture. Maverick was arrogant, cocky, full of attitude. He thought the rules didn't apply to him because he was talented. In reality, that personality gets you eliminated from flight training faster than almost anything else. The instructors are specifically watching for what they call golden arm syndrome. Pilots who think they're so naturally gifted that they don't need to follow procedures. Those pilots are dangerous to themselves and everyone around them, and the Navy doesn't want them. Real fighter pilots absolutely have confidence. You can't strap yourself into a machine capable of Mach 1.8 without believing you can handle it. But that confidence is matched with humility and respect for the aircraft and the mission and the enemy. Every flight starts with a detailed brief that covers every aspect of the mission. Who's flying what position, what the timeline looks like, what the weather is, what threats might be encountered, what the emergency procedures are, what the communication plan is, contingencies for if things go wrong. This brief might last 2 hours for a flight that lasts 90 minutes. That's the level of preparation expected. After every flight comes the debrief, and this is where the real learning happens. You sit down with everyone who flew and you analyze every single decision made during the flight. What went right? What went wrong? What could have been done better? There's no rank in the debrief room. A junior pilot can critique a senior pilot if the critique is valid and constructive. The only thing that matters is truth and improvement. You're not defending your ego. You're not making excuses. You're identifying mistakes so those mistakes don't happen in combat where the consequences are permanent. This culture of constant evaluation and honest self-assessment is what makes Navy fighter pilots so effective. They're not relying on bravado or raw talent. They're relying on meticulous preparation, rigorous training, learning from every mistake. It's not as cinematic as Maverick's personality, but it keeps pilots alive and makes them lethal. Let's talk about the danger, because the movie portrayed it as exciting and thrilling. Maverick flew into the danger zone and came out a hero. Real danger in naval aviation is random and unforgiving. Aircraft have mechanical failures. Engines quit. Flight controls malfunction. Weather turns deadly with little warning. Spatial disorientation causes pilots to fly into the water thinking they're climbing. Mid-air collisions happen when aircraft get too close in bad visibility. Carrier landings go wrong when the hook doesn't catch or the deck is pitching more than expected. Since 1950, the Navy has lost thousands of aircraft and hundreds of pilots in accidents. Not combat. Accidents during training and routine operations. These are people who did everything right, who followed every procedure, who were at the top of their field, and they still died because flying high-performance aircraft of ships in the middle of the ocean is inherently dangerous. The safety record has improved dramatically over the decades, thanks to better training and better aircraft and better procedures. But the risk never goes to zero. It can't go to zero when you're doing something this extreme. Every squadron has memorials, plaques with names, young men and women who didn't come home. The pilots see these memorials every day. They know the risks aren't theoretical. They know that every time they strap into the cockpit, there's a real chance something could go catastrophically wrong. And they do it anyway. Not because they're adrenaline junkies or thrill seekers, but because they're professionals who understand the mission and accept the responsibility that comes with it. Now, let's talk about something the movie barely touched on. The sacrifice. To become a Navy fighter pilot, you're committing the prime years of your life to incredibly demanding work. Your 20s and early 30s aren't spent traveling for fun or building a business or having anything resembling a normal life. They're spent deploying on aircraft carriers for months at a time. When you deploy, you're living in a small stateroom on a ship with 5,000 other sailors. You're flying multiple times a week in challenging conditions. You're working 12 to 14-hour days. You're missing birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, everything. Your family back home is dealing with life without you. Broken appliances, sick kids, car problems, school events, all the things that happen in normal life. And you're on the other side of the world, unable to help, unable to be there. You can email when the ship has bandwidth. You can maybe make a phone call once a week if you're lucky. But you're not there. You're absent for huge chunks of your family's life. The divorce rate among military aviators is significantly higher than the national average. The constant deployments, the stress, the danger, the time apart, it destroys marriages. Some relationships survive. Many don't. If you have kids, you're missing massive parts of their childhood. First words, first steps, little league games, school plays, all happening without you while you're flying combat air patrols over the Pacific or the Mediterranean. There's no pause button on your kids growing up, and you don't get those moments back. And let's talk about the money, because people assume fighter pilots make bank. As a junior officer, you're making somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 a year depending on flight, pay and where you're stationed. That sounds decent until you remember you have a 4-year degree in skills that could earn you 2 or 3 times that much flying for the airlines or working in the private sector. You're not doing this for the money. Nobody becomes a military pilot for the money. You're doing it because serving your country means something to you. Because flying cutting-edge aircraft is worth the sacrifice. Because being part of the most elite aviation community on Earth is the dream. But make no mistake, it is sacrifice. Real, tangible sacrifice that affects every aspect of your life. And if you're not ready for that, if that sounds like more than you want to give, There's no shame in that. It's okay to decide this isn't for you. Most people make that decision, which is why only a tiny fraction of the population ever even attempts this path. Let me tell you about what happens after you finally earn your wings and get assigned to a fleet squadron. This is when the real work begins. You're the new guy, the FNG as they call it, and you know less about combat operations than you think. All that training was just the foundation. Now, you're learning the specific tactics and procedures of your squadron. You're learning how to integrate with the carrier air wing. You're learning the mission sets, air superiority, strike missions, close air support, maritime interdiction, electronic warfare coordination. Each one requires specialized knowledge and skills. You're flying several times a week, and every flight has a purpose. You're building your proficiency in different mission types. You're learning to work with other aircraft in the air wing. The Uta Hawkeye that provides airborne early warning and control. The A-18 Growlers that jam enemy radars. The other Hornets and Super Hornets in your squadron. This isn't solo flying. This is coordinated warfare where everyone needs to know their role and execute it perfectly. One person's mistake can compromise the entire mission or get someone killed. The training never stops. Even experienced pilots are constantly learning and adapting. New weapon systems get introduced. New tactics get developed. The threat evolves. You might be flying against 4th-generation fighters today, but tomorrow you need to understand how to deal with 5th-generation stealth aircraft or advanced surface-to-air missile systems. The learning curve never flattens. You're always a student, always improving, always preparing for a threat you hope you never face but must be ready to defeat. Then comes your first deployment. You're heading out on a carrier for 6 to 9 months. The ship becomes your entire world. Your stateroom is maybe 80 square feet if you're lucky, and you're sharing it with another officer. Your rack, your bed, is basically a coffin with a mattress. You're stacked 3 high with maybe 2 feet of clearance. The first few weeks, you're bumping your head constantly. The food gets monotonous fast. The gym is always crowded. The internet is slow and expensive when it works at all. And you're stuck on this floating city with 5,000 other people for months. But when you're flying, none of that matters. You're launching of the catapult, going from 0 to 160 miles per hour into seconds. The acceleration slams you back into your seat. Your stomach drops as the aircraft leaves the deck, and you're flying over open ocean. You're doing the job you trained years to do. You're part of power projection, part of American foreign policy made tangible. That carrier and its air wing represent more firepower than most countries' entire military, and you're an integral part of it. The missions are real. You're not just training anymore. You're flying combat air patrols, ready to intercept any aircraft that approaches the carrier strike group. You're flying strike missions against actual targets in actual combat zones. You're providing close air support to troops on the ground who are depending on you to keep them alive. The weight of that responsibility is immense. These aren't training scenarios with simulated weapons. These are real missiles on your jet, real bombs, real bullets. And if you employ them, real people die. You need to be absolutely certain you're targeting the right thing, following the rules of engagement, making the right decision in the seconds you have to make it. You're also dealing with the mundane but critical aspects of naval aviation. Maintenance. Your jet needs constant care. PI flight inspections where you're checking every panel, every surface, looking for anything out of place. Post-flight inspections. Writing up discrepancies so the maintainers can fix them. The maintainers work around the clock keeping these aircraft flyable. They're in the hangar bay or on the flight deck in all weather, fixing hydraulic leaks and replacing parts and troubleshooting electrical problems. You depend on them completely, and you develop massive respect for their skill and dedication. There's also the administrative work that never ends. Writing reports, maintaining your qualifications, studying intelligence briefs, planning missions. The flying is maybe 20% of the job. The other 80% is everything else required to make those flights successful. It's not glamorous. It's just necessary. And through all of this, you're missing life back home. Your friends are getting married, having kids, buying houses, advancing in their careers. You're seeing it all through social media and occasional phone calls. You're watching your own family grow and change through a screen. Your parents are getting older. Your siblings are moving on with their lives. And you're on a ship in the middle of the Pacific or the Arabian Gulf or the Mediterranean, doing a job most people will never understand. When you finally come home from deployment, there's a reunion. Your family is there on the pier, holding signs, waving flags. It's emotional and overwhelming. But then comes the adjustment. You've been living in a completely different world for months. Reintegrating into normal life is harder than people expect. Your family has adapted to life without you. They've developed routines and rhythms that don't include you. You can't just slot back in like nothing happened. It takes time. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. And just when everyone's adjusted, you're training for the next deployment. This is the cycle. Deploy, come home, train, deploy again. For years, some pilots love it. The flying, the mission, the camaraderie of the squadron. It makes the sacrifice worthwhile. Other pilots realize after a deployment or two that the cost is too high. They complete their service obligation and get out. They take jobs with the airlines or defense, contractors, or they start completely different careers. There's no judgment either way. Everyone who makes it this far has already proven themselves beyond what most people could imagine. For those who stay in, who make the Navy a career, the challenges evolve. You're promoted. You take on more responsibility. You're leading divisions, then departments, then entire squadrons. You're making decisions that affect dozens or hundreds of people. The flying becomes less frequent as the administrative burden increases. Some officers stay in the cockpit as long as they can. Others transition to leadership roles where they're shaping the future of naval aviation, even if they're not flying as much. And eventually, after 20 or 25 years of service, you retire. Your kids are grown. You've missed huge chunks of their lives, but hopefully you've also shown them what service and sacrifice and commitment look like. You've flown aircraft that most people only see in movies. You've landed on carriers hundreds of times. You've employed weapons in combat. You've led men and women in one of the most demanding environments imaginable. You've done things that 99.9% of people will never do. And you've got the memories and the scars, physical and emotional, to prove it. So after everything I've just told you, after this deep dive into what it really takes and what it really costs, let me bring this full circle. Top Gun is a fantastic movie. It's entertaining. It's inspiring. It got people excited about aviation. But it's fiction designed to sell tickets and tell a story. The real path to becoming a Navy fighter pilot is longer, harder, more demanding, and requires more sacrifice than any 2-hour movie could ever show. If you're still with me, if learning all of this hasn't killed your interest, then maybe you have what it takes. Because the real fighter pilots, the actual men and women doing this job right now in squadrons around the world and on carriers deployed overseas, they knew the truth and chose this path anyway. They knew about the years of training. They knew about the constant pressure. They knew about missing time with family. They knew about the danger. They knew about all of it. And they decided it was worth it. The Navy isn't looking for Mavericks. The Navy has never been looking for Mavericks. Hollywood created that character because rebels make good movies. The Navy is looking for intelligent, disciplined, physically exceptional people who can work as part of a team, who can follow complex procedures under extreme stress, who can make split-second life and death decisions, who can learn from criticism, who can lead others, who can put the mission and their teammates above their own ego. If that sounds like you, if you think you might have what it takes, then start preparing now. Get that college degree and something challenging. Push yourself physically every single day. Study the subjects that matter: physics, mathematics, aerodynamics. Read about military history and aviation history. Talk to actual pilots and ask them the hard questions about what the job really entails. Understand that the road ahead is longer and harder than you can possibly imagine right now. But also understand that the people who complete that road become part of something legendary. They join a brotherhood and sisterhood of naval aviators who have accomplished something extraordinary. They earn the right to wear those wings. And there's no more respected symbol in military aviation. That's the real story behind Top Gun. That's what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the music fades and reality begins. The real fighter pilots aren't movie stars with perfect hair. They're regular people who achieved extraordinary things through years of dedication and sacrifice and an absolutely unbelievable work ethic. They're not rebels breaking rules for dramatic effect. They're consummate professionals executing impossibly complex missions under pressure that would destroy most people. They're not doing it for fame or recognition. They're doing it because someone needs to defend this country from the air, and they decided they were willing to pay the price to be that person. If this video opened your eyes to what military aviation really looks like, if you learned something that changed your perspective on what these pilots actually go through, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps other people discover this content and learn the truth behind the Hollywood myths that shape their understanding of military service. And if you want more real stories about special operations, military aviation, elite warriors, and the truth about serving without any Hollywood filter or sugarcoating, hit that subscribe button for silent warriors. We're here to show you the reality of military service, the glory and the sacrifice, the incredible achievements and the brutal costs, everything they don't show you in the movies, because real life is more complex and more impressive than fiction. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into reality. Remember, the real heroes don't need Hollywood to make them look good. Their actions and their service speak for themselves. And those actions are more impressive than anything any screenwriter could ever invent. These are the people who deserve your respect and your understanding of what they actually go through to do what they do. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and remember that the truth is always more interesting than the fiction.